How's it going, everybody? And welcome to this next edition of the Stupid Questions podcast. Today, we're going to be talking with Tommy Zaferes. He is the, as Instagram says, photog for World Triathlon and Superleague triathlons, who takes lots of awesome action photos. You can go check him out on Instagram. He is also the head of talent identification at USA Triathlon, which means that he does a lot of specific work to find the best cream of the crop athletes across the United States of America. So today, we talk a little bit about his life. I talk about his wife, Katie, who I'm sure most of you have already heard of, and also his young boy, Kimball, and how he came up with that name. A lot of awesome topics of conversation today. So without further ado, don't want to spoil too much, here is Tommy Zaferes. Thank you so much for coming on, for accepting the invitation to just have you on and get to know a little bit about you. I don't know if you've had a chance to listen to any of the past podcasts or anything, but how I typically like to start is to ask a little bit of a third person question. And that question is, who is Tommy?
So, Tommy right now, or who is Tommy in general?
Who is Tommy right now and in general?
So, Tommy right now works for USA Triathlon and World Triathlon and is a full-time dad,
Yeah.
while his wife is currently going for her third Olympic Games in Paris.
Yeah.
So she just went to her final race in Chile at a World Cup down there. And so I was single dadding it for a
Yeah.
week, trying to get all my USA Triathlon stuff done and last minute find babysitters and, and do all
Yeah.
that stuff. So yeah, that's who I am right now, is a overwhelmed dad
Yeah, for
involved
sure.
heavily in the triathlon world.
Yeah. Nice, man. In general, who is Tommy? Like, if you were to kind of drop some of those things, how would we get to know you a little bit?
So Tommy likes watching YouTube Magic, likes watching surfing and skateboarding, really following
Sick.
those. I don't want to say, like, I don't follow mainstream sports like football or baseball or basketball, but I follow surfing and skateboarding very closely.
Really?
Yeah, I really enjoy cycling. So even though I'm retired as a professional athlete,
Mm.
any of my free time, I'll just go and try to ride my bike. Cycling community where I live is awesome. Kimball has a jogging stroller, and so I also like going for runs with him. So if I have any time, I'll go run or ride. Heavily into Strava KOM hunting, so I try to get all
Nice.
the segments around where I live.
Nice. That's sick. With the running stroller, I'm curious because I'm 31. I don't have any kids yet, but it's in the somewhat near future. When you're running with your kid in one of those strollers, is the workout the same? Is it different? Does it give everything that you want from running? Like, what is that experience like?
I would say that it changes your technique, so just be careful with that. It is much more difficult when you're going uphill and having to push that. It is not aerodynamic. I would say, because like people ask me that all the time, like, oh, what's the difference, like mile pace wise? And I would say it's probably about 30 to 40 seconds slower
Yeah.
per mile. So I can do all the easy runs with Katie, no problem. When I'm fit, I can do some of her workouts. So it's not like terrible, but if she's doing like a really hard workout, there's no way that I
Yeah.
could keep up.
Yeah.
But as an example, I run with a professional run group here, the Puma Elite Squad. And so if they go for an easy run and they're running, let's just say 640 mile pace, like I can do that no problem with the stroller.
That is super impressive. Is this like a carbon fiber disc wheeled stroller?
Yeah, no, it's actually just a pretty generic like mom and dad.
Yeah.
Like it's got the like off-road wheels or whatever. It's got some suspension in it, but yeah, no, nothing fancy.
Yeah.
There was a guy from Denmark who set the world record for half marathon. He
Oh,
ran
no
a
kidding.
107 with a
Oh
baby in a
my,
stroller, and he
like a
had
live
like,
baby?
yeah, a live baby,
Oh my God.
his toddler, and yeah, so he had the wheels that had like bald tires, like no rolling resistance, and
Yeah.
yeah, it was all dialed in. But yeah, mine's just a stock standard.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's super cool. So I want to go back to a little bit of Tommy in the earlier years. You said you grew up in California. What part of California?
I grew up in Santa Cruz, California,
Okay,
so a little
nice.
bit about an hour south of San Francisco, on the coast.
Yeah. So surf, skateboarding, that's kind of where that love came from.
Yeah, it was in a debate with Huntington Beach as the surfing capital of the world or something like that. But
Oh, really?
they let Huntington Beach have it because it's like a really small hippie community, and
Yeah.
they didn't want tourists coming to like surf there because it's the surfing capital of the world. So
Yeah.
yeah, but it's a very small, like niche, very hippie community.
Yeah. You grew up surfing quite a bit?
Yeah, I was homeschooled actually. I never went to public school, and so
Okay,
I
nice.
had a bunch of extra time, and that was considered quote marine biology.
Yeah.
My mom would just take me to the
Love
beach,
it.
and yeah, so I would be able to surf when other kids were in school and like go skateboarding and stuff once I finished my homework and
Yeah.
stuff. So yeah, just grew up at the beach doing all that stuff.
Yeah, for sure. So now that you have Kimball and how old is Kimball?
Kimball's 16 months now.
Okay. So you got a little ways off before you start thinking about school, but given your experience with homeschooling, do you think that you will travel a similar path in terms of education? Nope, not at
Nope,
all.
absolutely not. Yeah, get him to school as quickly as
Yeah.
possible. Let's get him to daycare. I
Yeah.
need some time.
Yeah, yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
he's a very needy kid. I'm trying not to get him to have single child syndrome where he's just like gets everything that he wants all the time. But like you leave the room, he just like starts chasing after you and like takes your hand, wants to show you
Oh,
everything,
wow.
wants you to be part of everything. Like you're trying to make food and he's like stepping on your feet and like hugging your leg and stuff.
Yeah.
And you're like, buddy, I love you, but like we need some separation. Like you need to
Yeah.
be okay with like going to play by yourself in the other room or something. But
Yeah. So is he gravitate more toward you or more toward mom?
well, when Katie's gone, like of course me,
Sure.
and then yeah, like I'll watch him while Katie goes and trains, and then when she's done training, she'll watch him, and then I work for USA Triathlon. So I would say like he just gravitates towards whoever is there.
Yeah, yeah.
He just wants somebody, some sort of attention.
Yeah.
He's yeah, not very good at being alone.
Yeah, for sure. So your homeschooling journey, did you do that all the way through K through 12?
Yeah, but I graduated. I started taking college classes when I was like 13 or 14 with
Oh,
my older
wow.
sister and like with my grandpa. So we took an
Okay.
oceanography class, and my grandpa was the oldest in the class, and I was the youngest in the class. And we did some like extra credit stuff and whatever. So I ended up graduating high school when I was like 14. I
What?
took a year
That's
off of
crazy.
school, and then yeah, I went to junior college when I was 16, and yeah, graduated a bit early. I hated school, hated it.
Yeah.
Like really good test taker, but hated reading, just
Mm,
hated the idea of school that like
yeah.
everything was put into a box, that everything was based off of this, that all of these 20 kids in the same class have to learn the exact same
Yeah.
thing when it's like we have different interests, we have different learning curves, like
Sure.
it's just not a great structure. That was me personally. And
Yeah.
so like being homeschooled, I was just very happy that I was able to find my own path, really focus on the things that I was interested in and then capitalize on that and like kind of avoid the things that I didn't want to do just because you had to do it.
Yeah.
And so yeah, going through college, I just did the bare minimum to get by and like get good enough grades to kind of graduate. But that it's kind of a longer story. But basically, I was
I love
planning
it.
on going to a 4 year, but at the time it was right in between Olympic trials for swimming, so I decided to stay with my club swim coach through Olympic trials, and then I was planning on going back to school. So timeline: I graduated in 2006
Okay.
to graduated from junior college. Sorry, so the
Yep.
first 2 years, and so I was going to do the second 2 years, but in 2008 was Olympic trials, and so
Yep.
I just decided from 2006 to 2008 to stay with my club coach and then just train for the Olympics because I was like, I really hate school. There's time for that. I can go back if I want. After Olympic trials, I just decided not to go back,
Yeah.
and was very happy with that.
Yeah, for sure. So with the Olympic trials, you were focused primarily only on swimming?
Yeah, so at that stage, I only knew swimming. I didn't even know triathlon existed.
Okay. I feel like that's relatively natural, assuming you spent quite a bit of time in the ocean on a board. Like, you have to learn, I would assume, a feel for the water as well.
Yeah, I think swimming. I started swimming when I was like 6 years old, so that came first before anything else. But I also grew up doing junior lifeguards and
Okay.
basically learning how to be a lifeguard, like a beach lifeguard.
Yeah.
So just being involved with like water sports and like running on the beach, I think helped gravitate towards the triathlon thing, even though I didn't know what it was.
Yeah, for sure. Do you have any memories during, it can be any of that time point that you were kind of doing homeschooling or even up into junior college, of memories that just really stand out as being a formative foundation for who you are today?
I think probably all of it.
Yeah.
It's like subconsciously you just absorb everything that you're around and everything that
Right.
you're doing, even if you're not focused on it or paying attention. The
Sure.
perfect example is what I'm doing now as a professional sports photographer for World Triathlon. My parents were wedding photographers, and I grew up around them shooting weddings, doing
Nice.
portraits, family photos, like senior photos, all this stuff. I would sit. This is at the time when the internet was attached to your phone line, and
Yeah.
like you could only use the phone or the internet and you couldn't use both, and we only had one computer, so I would sit there waiting for my mom to be done with whatever she was doing so I could check my email,
Yeah.
and she would be editing like wedding pictures and stuff like that. And my dad, of course, was the creative, like, don't take the picture that anybody else could take, sort of thing. And
Yeah.
I never wanted anything to do with photography because that's what they did. And I was like, weddings, portraits, like, oh man, what a nightmare. Like taking
Yeah.
pictures of families with like little babies and kids. I'm like, oh, what a headache.
Yeah.
So I was not involved with photography at all. Didn't want to be, was not interested. But then later on, when I met Katie and before races, we'd always go on a photo walk. So we'd always experience all the new locations that we'd be racing at. So after race briefing, we'd go out for a walk and just take pictures of the area that we were at. We'd go to dinner. And then like my photos were, people were noticing like, oh, that's more creative than what most people would take of just like a touristy shot or whatever. And so that photography thing led to Katie buying me a camera. And then once I got the camera, that just snowballed into, we'll probably get into it later. But all the things that I learned from my parents growing up, I absorbed, even though I like consciously made the decision, I'm not going to go into photography because that's what they did. And like, it seemed terrible, like just from being around it, because I'm like weddings, like portraits, all that stuff. But sports photography, obviously very different. But everything that they did growing up, me growing up around it, led to me being successful in what I'm doing now.
Yeah, for sure. It sounds like it. So who are you more like, your mom or your dad?
Good combination of both. Probably my mom. No, I don't know. It's a 50-50 split, I would say.
Yeah. What are they doing now? Do they still do wedding photography and stuff like that? Or?
They're both retired. So my dad plays in a blues band, and my mom coaches running and is training for marathons, basically. So it's funny because they obviously rubbed off on me in the photography aspect. But then when I started triathlon, my mom never ran before. Once I started doing triathlon, she started picking up running. And now she's almost 70 years old and has done like ultra marathons and like 50Ks and stuff. And then my dad, he worked in the grocery business for 35 years and then was also a wedding photographer at the same time. And then so he retired, but he's just always loved music. And on his lunch break at the grocery store, which was between 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock, he would go down to the beach and just busk, like not on purpose, but people would just put money down and he was just enjoying playing music. And then a guy came by, a random guy was like, hey, do you mind if I jam with you? He's like, sure. So they started meeting there at 10 o'clock every day during his lunch hour. And so then they created a band called 10 o'clock lunch. Now they book gigs like all over Santa Cruz, and like they made enough money that they had to pay taxes. Like they have auditions for their band and stuff. So if I'm home visiting, like if Katie and I are there, my dad, we're like going to bed and my dad's like just leaving to go play a show. And they'll get back at like 3 a.m. and stuff. So they're just loving retirement. And my mom still is working closely with some like trainees, helping people train for marathons and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's super neat. So with your dad's side, the music, I want to touch on that just for a little bit because it's a huge part of just who I grew up to be through my dad's side actually as well. For you, where does that mix playing with you? I don't imagine you have a ton of time, but are you musical? Do you play?
I play guitar, but I say I play guitar. I know how, and I used to play all the time. I used to have calluses and stuff, but now I don't at all. Like I haven't played probably since I started triathlon, which was back in 2010. So if I pick up a guitar, I can still do the normal chord progression stuff, but my fingers just start hurting after like 30 seconds. But my dad just bought a guitar, an acoustic guitar, and sent it to my house for when he comes to visit, so that he doesn't have to travel with his guitar. So I do have a guitar now in the house that I have access to if I wanted to play, but typically with time, like especially with a kid and like traveling and stuff, like there's no way. Like you need to dedicate to that. There's so many things I want to do, like
I know I was gonna say
continuing to learn Spanish and continuing to play guitar. Those are things that I'd love to do, but like I would rather ride my bike, or I'd rather go for a run with Kimball, or I'd rather just like relax for a second and like not have to focus on anything. So
it's a season. I feel like you're in definitely a season. I mean, obviously everything you got going on personally, what Katie's got going on, those things will change over time, but Kimball seems to be like a main focus right now, and I'm sure that takes a ton of time.
Yeah, and that goes back to your very first question of like, who is Tommy? It's like, who is Tommy currently, or who is Tommy like in general? Because same thing, like if I have time, I'd love to learn like sleight of hand magic tricks, like, but that takes so much time and practice that I'm like, I don't even want to start, because like I don't like going a percentage in. Like I like going all in
Yeah.
and doing something where I know I have an extended amount of time to be able to complete it. So as an
Yeah.
example, like even with housework, it's like
Mm.
if I'm looking out and I see that I have like the front yard split on the side of the driveway. If I only have time to do the left side and then like tomorrow I'll do the right side, I just won't do it until I have time to do both sides. Like it has to all be done at
Yeah.
once. And I'm like that in everything in life. Like
Yeah.
I don't like starting something if I'm not able to finish it. That
Yeah.
really bothers me.
Yeah, for sure. Do you feel like that character trait was something that came from nurture or just nature? You were born with it?
Yeah, I think that was just me. Like, I don't
Yeah.
know anybody else who is like that, and
Yeah.
like it bothers Katie. Like,
Yeah.
but and my parents aren't like that. It's not like I didn't grow up around it. That's just me personally.
Yeah. Yeah. That's super interesting. Really quick, what kind of guitar did your dad buy?
I don't know. I'd have to go
Okay.
check.
Okay. No worries.
I don't remember. It's probably like a Martin or something, but
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know.
Martin's my favorite. It's got that nice deep sound. I love that sound. More moody.
Yeah.
Sweet man. So I was gonna ask you a question about minimalism next. I talked to your wife Katie, and she said that you kind of subscribe to this idea of if you get more than 3 shirts in your wardrobe, then you're like, oh, I had time to get rid of something. Where did that come from?
Well, that's a little bit exaggerated because that's my travel rule. So
Okay.
I don't travel with more than 3 things of anything. So
Okay.
like 3 cycling kits, 3 run kits, like 3 shirts. With pants, usually it's just 2 pants and 1 pair of shorts. So like 3 bottoms or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Socks, I'll probably go a little bit more, like maybe 5 pairs of socks, 5 pairs of underwear or
Yeah.
whatever. But yeah, I'm all about just this is what you need and this is what you'll use. If you bring more, maybe you'll use it, maybe you won't, but like it's not worth having to like pack all of that
Yeah.
stuff. And like if you really need something, you can either borrow it or like I like layering stuff, or you could just go out and buy it. Like
Yeah.
it's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
But yeah, minimalism for me just is organization.
Yeah.
I just hate clutter, so that's been
Same.
really hard with Kimball and all his toys. When he has toys all over the floor, I'm just like, oh man, and I'm like constantly cleaning it up. And
Yeah.
Katie's like, why are you doing that? Just like let him play and then like clean it up at the end of the day. I'm like, I just don't like looking at it. I don't like seeing it.
Yeah.
One time Katie had left. This was like very, very early on in our relationship. And like, I still can't believe I did it, but she had left. Like she had so much clothes. And like I helped her move from the Olympic Training Center to Arizona when she was just starting her triathlon career. And she had so much stuff. Like as an example, she's going to Arizona and she brought her snow shovel. And I'm like, come on, like you don't need a snow shovel in Arizona. Why would you ever bring that? Like just get rid of it. And so she had just like t-shirts galore from like when she was an age group swimmer, the ones that have like your name with the star next to it, just like race t-shirts,
Yeah.
but like so many. So anyway, she left a bag at my house one time and I told her if she could remember what was in the bag, then I'll save whatever she remembers, and if she doesn't remember it, then she doesn't need it. Like it's
so
not
funny.
important. And so I think I ended up using like a few t-shirts that she had left as like bike rags or something like that because like she didn't remember what they were. Just they could have been anything. So
Yeah.
but that, I mean, I have no idea where this started. Was definitely not my parents. It was not my sister. It was not my family. I just like having everything very clean, like having a clean desk, like having the bed made, you know, like knowing where everything is. I always put my keys in the exact same spot. I put my wallet in the exact same spot. Like how everything's organized, I always put everything exactly the same, so I never forget where it is. And I always take notes of where Katie puts things because she just puts things in different places and then can never find it. And so she's like, dang it, I don't know where my phone is. I was like, oh, I saw it in the shower or whatever. Like, and I'll just take notes. But no idea where that started. Still continues on to this day. That I don't think it's getting worse, but yeah, it's just it's staying where I'm like, all right, it's got to be clean, got to be fresh.
Yeah, for sure. I wonder if that will decrease as Kimball gets older.
I hope so.
Yeah. Do you think it's a little bit of like OCD, if I may put a limit? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like if I'm sitting at a table, like as an example with my phone, I'll put my phone so it's squared up, you know, right in the corner, and like I don't know why, I just like it like that. But I don't have to do that. Like it doesn't matter to me, but I just enjoy doing that and whatever.
No, I'm the same way actually. There's a lot of things I've tried to be a little less because my wife's sounds a little bit more like Katie, where she's constantly leaving her phone all the time, or it's like always something's lost every few minutes. So it's like, oh yeah, I saw it over here, I saw it over there. So can relate a little bit. So take me back when you start, I guess I would assume it's around high school, college, where you start getting into swimming, and then that progression that moved into, I'm going to be an Olympic swimmer, or that's the dream. Then I get into triathlon, and I assume you meet Katie. I want to kind of hear that progression story.
All right, we'll try to keep it simple, but basically I swam my whole life growing up. And naturally, like from 8 years old, I was pretty good at it.
Yeah.
I really didn't really care about swimming because I was like, what's swimming going to do for me in the long term? Like I was really into skateboarding and surfing and stuff.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until, I don't even know how old I was, maybe 15 or 16. Maybe 16. I went to junior nationals because junior nationals was at Stanford, which is like an hour and a half from where I live. So I just drove there rather than like flying across the country to go there.
Yeah.
And I went there and ended up winning the 50 fly, the 100 fly, and the 200 fly.
Oh,
and
wow.
at that specific race, this was back in who knows what year. I don't even know how old I would have been, 2002 maybe or something like that. They didn't have 50s before. Now it's a regular thing. But then that was like a new thing, and they also had semifinals, which they didn't have before. So it was like this very unique setup of junior nationals.
Yeah.
So I won every single race that I did, from like prelims to semifinals to finals, and I was the only person to sweep an event. And so then I was in like Swimming World magazine, and like from that point I became like what they call a blue chip in recruitment. So I was getting letters from like every college. I could have gone wherever I wanted for swimming, with like a full ride, and like all the people were reaching out and stuff. But I hated school, so I didn't want to choose a school that I was going to go to, because I'd already done junior college. And so for
you're like 15 around this time?
Yeah, 15 or 16, something like that. And at the same time, I was swimming for the junior college, and I broke almost every single record except for the mile. And the only reason I didn't break the mile record at the school was because you didn't offer the mile except for at state championships and at nationals. And at state championships, you're only allowed to swim 3 events. And so I wanted to swim my best events. And I ended up setting a national record in the 200 fly. And that also helped like with college recruitment. So that was happening at the same time as junior nationals was happening. Because as I said, like I graduated early. So when I was 16, like I was going through the junior college phase. And so then by the time I quote graduated from junior college, that's when Olympic trials was like I was preparing for Olympic trials, and I didn't want to change my coaching environment. Working with the coach that had been very successful, in this last year, I didn't want to go to a school where I would miss a year of eligibility to swim and like choose the school to go swim at, but then only have 1 year and then be stuck going to that school. And so then I wanted to choose a school to go to for educational purposes. But as I told you at the beginning, I didn't want to go to school for education. So I was like, all right, I'm just going to put all that on hold, stay with my club coach, train through Olympic trials in 2008. And then once that happens, I'll go back to school. And so then I ended up never going back to school. But that's kind of the progression that happened with, growing up swimming. Junior nationals.
Let me interject a question for this kind of time period, because, 15, 16 is a relatively young age. As guys, we typically, you may not have, but we typically bloom a little bit later. So, like, mind development's still happening. You're taking in a ton of, like, obviously, cheer, positive reinforcement. You're somewhat famous for these things. How did that affect you as a person? Was that any type of, like, a shock, or, like, did it shock the system at all? Did you think, no?
No, yeah. From what I recall, like, the second that I finished Olympic trials in 2008, I just went to the skate park. Like I got home and I was like, sweet, I don't have to worry about getting injured anymore. Now I can actually do what I want. And like, I just immediately started coaching swimming, and then I started working at Safeway. Like I was just happy to just have time and do whatever I want living in Santa Cruz. Like didn't really care what was going on. I was just happy to be done swimming.
Was the swimming career encouraged and kind of pushed in any way by family and friends, or is it?
Not really. I think I just pursued it because I was good at it. And I mean, my parents wanted me to go to school and like get a degree and stuff. Well, more my dad. My mom was like, whatever, I don't really care. And my dad wasn't like super pushy, but he was like, you're gonna need to do something. So like, I mean, I know you said you're going to go back, but he was encouraging. I never felt pressure whatsoever. And when I decided not to, he was not like, oh, you're making a bad decision. He was just like, all right, that's what you want to do. I'm sure that you'll make it work, but just know like it might be hard, and like you might be stuck at the grocery store, like working there for 30 years like I did or whatever. But I knew that I wasn't going to work at the grocery store for that long. It was just like a temporary thing when, I'm young, and I was coaching swimming, hanging out with friends, surfing and skateboarding, and
living life,
trying to figure out, what I was going to do next. And that's kind of, I would say I'm very lucky in the fact that things have worked out very well for me, in the fact that like the timing of meeting people or the right place at the right time has just happened. And it's just been like that my whole life. I've been so lucky. And I don't take it for granted. But the biggest thing I think is like having made the decisions for myself, being like, this is just what I want to do that I'm enjoying. That's what opened up doors to meet other people. So if I had just decided to like work an office job or something, I may not have met so-and-so, and that person may not have introduced me to so-and-so, and then I would be doing what I'm doing right now or whatever. And so I feel like just going with the flow, living the life that I felt I wanted to is what opened the doors to, the life I have now.
Yeah, for sure. So you're describing something that some people might call serendipity or some people might call providence. I'm curious, did you grow up with any type of a framework or mindset around some of these concepts? Maybe it was a religious one. Maybe it was more of just no.
No, yeah, not at all. I mean, I did grow up in the church. My family was Christian. I stopped going to church probably when I was like, I guess it was 16 when I was like old enough to drive and like didn't have to go. But yeah, I was like, I think I had the morals, but not anything else other than like I didn't feel like my life was predestined or that my decisions were going to determine my future or my afterlife or anything like that. Like very neutral across the board of like, life is what it is and you're only here for a certain amount of time. So do what you want to do and hopefully it'll work out. If it's not working out, then like do something else.
Yeah, for sure. It seems like a pretty practical mindset. You seem like a pretty practical person. So.
Well, Santa Cruz lifestyle, I guess, is rubbed off on me.
Yeah, for sure. So in raising Kimball, then, if I may ask a little bit more of a personal question, in raising him, like obviously, I've seen some of my friends now. I'm 31 who have started to have kids, and I've seen it kind of radically change the way that they, maybe not all of them radically, but really change the way that they kind of think about life and how they present themselves, how they talk, whatever. There's a lot of different things I think that are considered. Are you thinking about like, well, as Kimball grows, what morals do I want him to have, or what do I want him to see, like how to push hard and do hard things?
I would just hope that he sees what Katie and I strive to just be good people. And if he's growing up around good people, then he's hopefully, and if we just love him, he's going to be a good person. So I don't think we're trying to push anything or like making sure that he has this or that. But if he is picking up on everything that we're doing, and if we're doing the right things, then hopefully that works out well.
Yeah, for sure. So I haven't actually met Katie yet. I messaged her a few times just to get some questions that I'll get into later for maybe getting a little dirt on you. The minimalism one was one of them. You guys both seem like kind of a power couple. How did you meet? What was that first couple interactions like?
Yeah, so 2 parts. One, I met her in an elevator in San Diego before a race, but that wasn't like a real meeting. I was just being polite because she was wearing a USA shirt and I didn't recognize who she was. So I was just like, hey, how's it going? I'm Tommy. Katie, nice to meet you. And then we didn't even sit together at briefing or anything. Like, that was her first WTCS race. And like, I was training with an international squad. So I sat with the international friends, like the friends that I had, not the US athletes, just because they were US or I don't know. But so that was the first meeting. But the real meeting that we had was in Tijuvaras, Hungary at a World Cup. And at the after party, we like ate dinner together and I like grilled her with tons of questions. And like, it was just, we ended up talking like that whole weekend and then like all night at the after party until her shuttle was at 4 a.m. or something like that. So we just stayed up talking all night. And then, after that, we just never stopped talking. And then a month later ish, roughly, we went on our first date and then started officially dating. And then a year after that, I asked her to marry me. And then 3 months later, we got married. So it was all like very quick. Basically meeting her in Tijuvaras at the after party, it was like a completely different experience than meeting anybody else. Like the way that we clicked is unexplainable. It's the annoying friend where somebody who like can't find love, you tell them, oh, you'll meet the right person. It'll just happen. You don't need to like look or whatever. They're like, shut up. Like that is literally our story. It's like, I was not looking for anything. She was not looking for anything. And then it just happened. And it was like, this was like meant to be. It was one of those extra things, as I mentioned before in my life, that right place, right time. Like I wasn't even planning on going to that race. I just got injured and wasn't able to go to a different race. So last minute decided to go to this race. And then that happened. So it's one of those things where everything bad or what I feel like is bad or is not to my plan that has happened has led to something else that's even better.
Yeah, that's super cool. What is it about Katie that you liked and like?
Just her humility, her strength. Just, she is one of those people that is a good person. Like,
Hmm.
nobody has anything bad to say about her. She's nice to everybody. The way that she responds to every situation just comes across as super genuine. Yeah, like would never hurt a fly, like that type of person. And just her love for her family, her commitment to her friends, her commitment to her craft. Even though, like, you could say that she doesn't love the sport of triathlon, but she is very committed to it and approaches it incredibly
Yeah,
professionally. So, I mean, she's like that in every aspect of life.
sure.
And this could go on and on about like her diaries and like how much she is intentional about things and creating goals and like sticking to things and yeah, being very specific. So she's just like that in all of life, and what you see is what you get. And it was just very different, like initial like interaction with her.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Would you say that you guys have helped like grow each other individually?
Huge amounts.
Yeah.
Yeah. She tests me in ways, and I test her in ways, and that's perfect because she was saying before in relationships that she's had previously that like there was no testing whatsoever. It was kind of just like very passive. And
Mm,
so now she was like, oh wow, like you actually challenge me, like you ask me why am I doing this instead of this, and then I have to actually think about it rather than like not even questioning why I was doing this. Or if we're having an argument, like she's like, you actually talk things out and are like having a legitimate debate rather than just like yelling or something, you know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
and so the both of us work off each other, where things that I'm lacking like she provides, and then if she's lacking in some place that I provide, and like the two of us have worked things out over the years.
Yeah.
um, we've spent so much time together. We did the
Yeah.
math, and we've been married 3 times as long as a normal couple because of living together, training together, traveling together, like literally doing every single thing together. You spend so many hours that like it's not normal. And so if you're able to complete all of these hours together without getting divorced, I think you're in a winning relationship. And
Yeah.
yeah, if you're able to train and travel with somebody that you live with, I think you're in a winning spot.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's a rare thing to, well, just in general, not even in relationships, but to have a humble enough spirit to kind of what you're saying, be able to take a challenge and to challenge in a way that's not like attacking or defensive, but depending on what side of the conversation you're on. So that's really neat that you guys have that.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. So I'm curious with the lifestyle that you guys live. Like you said, you've done the hours, and I'd be curious to hear how long you guys have been married through all of the math that you guys did. So yeah, that's the first question. How long is that?
Well, when we did that, it was 5 years, and so we had been married 15 years.
Okay.
We got married in 2015, so it's been 8 years now. So
Yeah.
guess you could say we've been married for 24 years. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
But now with Kimball, and the last 2 years has been very different because, yeah, we're no longer training together because she was pregnant, so she wasn't training at all. And then now with Kimball, I'm watching Kimball while she's training, and then she comes back, and then I work. And so, yeah, it's been drastically different
Yeah.
the last couple of years. I would say since the end of 2020. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So with the lifestyle that you guys live, I mean, you guys are obviously so busy. You're traveling all around the world. You're doing all these things. Having two high performing people in their own respective fields living together and traveling and do all that things would seem like it would create stress and tension. Does it not for you guys? Are you just like a fluke where you're like, yeah, we just do it, we get it done, or yeah,
Yeah, I think we've fell into our roles, meaning that like Katie has her things that she likes doing and her timelines, and then I'll just kind of like pick up the slack where it needs to be picked up. And then like if there's something that I'm focused on that I need to do, like I'll focus on that, do that, and then ask her, and she'll pick up the slack there. But yeah, over the years, it's just morphed into a cohesive unit of like we are now like Katie
yeah,
will is much more of a planner, so she'll like go out and plan all these trips and say this is how it's going to work and
yeah,
this is how things are going to go, and then she'll just send me that information, and then I'll do it on my end, like with World Triathlon, or like well, I'll figure out my
yeah,
end. So she's kind of like the leader in that aspect, and of course, like with her life, she's the athlete,
sure,
so she needs to kind of determine all of that stuff. So I'm like, well, I'll just like make money over here and like make sure that we're set no matter what happens. If you get injured or if you get in an accident or a crash or something and you're not able to like do triathlon, like I have a set here, here's the set plan. So I'm kind of like the fallback guy.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, she drives everything, she runs everything, she plans everything, and then I'm just there in support.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. So how did you come up with the name Kimball? I heard that it was something to do with COVID and isolation in Slovakia.
No, no.
No?
So Katie's father passed away just before the Olympics, and
Okay.
his mantra in life was to be kind and humble. And so Kimball is kind and humble combined.
Oh, okay, that's
And
awesome.
so we wanted to name Kimball something special, something family related, and coming up with names like Katie had kind of generic names that she was thinking about, but I was like, I want it to be special. I want it to mean something,
Yeah.
but I don't want it to be her dad's name. I don't want it to be my dad's name. Like I want it to be something unique, but not so unique that people can't spell it and like all this stuff. So then
Yeah.
I was just like racking my brain and I was like, all right, humble and kind, like kind and humble. And I was like, Kimball, that could be a name. Like, and then also could be gender neutral. So, because we didn't find out what we were having
Yeah.
until he was born. And
Okay.
so I was like, oh, Kimball could be either a boy or a girl's name. So that
Yeah.
works. And Katie was like, I don't know if I don't like Kimball. But the second he was born, she's like, he's a Kimball. Like, we have to name him Kimball. So Kimball is in honor of her dad who wished her and everyone, his daughters, like to be humble and kind in life. So
Yeah.
kind and humble, Kimball.
Okay, good. Yeah, I got that messed up, but that's a beautiful story. That was when, I guess, 5 years ago. No, 16 months ago.
16 months ago
Yeah,
when
yeah,
he was
yeah.
born, yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Cool, man. What's his middle name?
William, so after
Yeah.
her dad. Yeah.
Okay, nice. Do you think you'll have more children in the future?
Katie wants to after Paris. Yeah.
Okay, nice. Yeah, good deal.
I never wanted to in the first place, like have a kid. I was like,
Really?
I'm not ready. Like my life's so good, but Katie's like, I'm getting older, and I'm like, oh man, like once we have a kid, like there's no going back though. Like you're just stuck. But yeah, like Katie, as a woman who's having the kid, like she has way more say in this than I do. So
Sure.
I'm like, if you want to have a kid, let's do it. And then after one kid, I was like, oh my gosh, one kid is enough. Like,
Yeah.
and she's like, I want to have a second one. I was like, do we have to have a second one? But she was like really all in on it. And of course, like, I'm happy to have a second one, and it's going to be very different if Katie is done racing. If she's
Yeah.
done with triathlon and we have a second child, that's going to change everything. It's just right now with traveling and my work for
it's
USA
next
Triathlon,
level.
for World Triathlon, her training full time. Like both of us are working and having a kid. It's just super overwhelming. But once Kimball starts daycare and once Katie is like taking a step back from racing, I mean, that's going to change
Yeah, it's a different
drastically how
dynamic,
much
which is
time we
super
have. And like, we're not going to have to organize every single race that we go to, having a babysitter that can be there full time, and like having an extra room in our Airbnb, or getting 2 rental cars instead of 1 rental car, or 1 big rental car, you know, just like all of these extra logistics that we have to go through for the year at every single race that needs to be planned ahead. And of course, if somebody's going to come to an event to help us support by watching Kimball the whole week, because I'm working for World Triathlon, Katie's getting ready to race, somebody needs to be watching Kimball.
Yeah.
Like it takes a lot of preparation, and you need to notify these people who are coming well in advance, and so that they can schedule things. And so it's just it's really hard, especially this year because Katie lost all her points being pregnant. She had to go. She wasn't sure she would get on the start list, so we couldn't plan ahead for which races she was going to, and we had to go through all these logistics of that you need to plan ahead for. And man, that to me was just overwhelming. And I think that all of that just built up, and that made me be like, I can't believe we could have 2 kids. That like, I couldn't fathom it. But now that that's all like simmered down a little bit, and like we have things figured out, and she's able to get starts at races, and we can plan ahead. And then also if she takes a step back from racing, like I think it'll all be fine, and 2 kids will be good.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think that once that time comes where she kind of takes a step down from the athletics, like specifically focused being on a professional athlete, that you'll take the helm in a different way and like kind of focus on something different?
Yeah, we've talked about that. I think once she takes a step back, it's just going to open up a lot of time to be able to do whatever. And at this stage, I have no idea what that is, whether or not it's pursuing a higher career within USA Triathlon, taking a step back from like World Triathlon and me not traveling to those races because she's not going to be there anymore.
Yeah.
Or maybe I am doing more World Triathlon races because she's not going there anymore and she can watch Kimball and I can just take these one-off trips. So I don't really know what that's going to look like. Kind of waiting till after Paris to see what she decides to do. And then we'll see what happens with having a kid and a second kid and see how things are going now that in January when Kimball starts daycare, if that opens things up as well. So lots to be figured out, but not too worried about it. Not planning on anything, but keeping doors open.
Yeah, for sure. So I did get two questions mixed up, and I apologize. So the Slovakia thing that she had me ask about, it said to ask you about your magic, specifically COVID isolation in Slovakia. What is that?
So yeah, in Slovakia, I shot the PTO, the very first Collins Cup that they had, and I ended up testing positive for COVID, and this was in 2020. No, sorry, 2021. And so in Slovakia, they still had the rules where you needed to quarantine for. They had 2 weeks, and if you test positive, it's quarantined for 2 weeks from the date that you test positive. So as an example, I tested positive. And if I wanted, 1 week later, I could test again. But if that test was positive again, I would have to stay 2 weeks from that point. So I needed to decide, like, do I want to chance it? Am I feeling better? Like, if I test positive, that's going to extend 2 weeks. Anyway, so I ended up being in Slovakia for a little over 2 weeks by myself, just quarantined at this top floor of a hotel room, but it was an athletic hotel. So they had like treadmills, they had smart trainers, like I had my bike there. They had like a giant patio with a hot tub, and like I had access to like all the rooms. They would just deliver my meals every day because I wasn't allowed to leave. I couldn't go outside except for like on my balcony. And
my goodness.
Yeah, they would deliver a bag lunch that had like a piece of fruit, some sort of like cup with like a lid, and then like a juice box or soda or whatever it was. So that was the only thing that I had in my room, was things that were being delivered, like food wise. And so I love magic. I love sleight of hand magic. And then as a creative, I just like unique things. So I like the idea of coming up with magic tricks that have never been done before. So I was using the food items, like the containers that the food was coming in and the actual food, to create magic tricks. And because I had endless time, I was just quarantined there with nobody else and nobody to talk to, and I had 2 weeks. So I would just invent my own magic tricks and I would film them, and I would just practice them, film them for hours, like literally for like 3 hours just in front of the camera, until I would get it where you could watch it frame by frame and not see how the magic trick was done, like sleight of hand wise. And then I would publish it or save the video. And so I don't do magic in person because to me, like, I would need to practice a lot to be able to execute. But I just like the idea of creating. And so I just created these tricks that are one-off tricks. They'll never be done again. And I was very happy that, I invented them. And then I jailbroke because I got to the point where I was like, I'm not sick anymore. I have tested negative, but because I had tested positive like a second time and I was supposed to stay longer, I asked the hotel, I was like, can I get in trouble, or can you guys get in trouble? They're like, we can't get in trouble, but we can't make you stay, but you could leave if you want. So I have a friend in Slovakia and I needed to get to the Superleague race that I was shooting. And so I called him up. He was going to Superleague as well. He's an announcer. And I was like, hey, if I can make it to you, he lives in Bratislava, which is like an hour away from where I was in Samarin. And I was like, if I can make it to you, can we drive to Munich or I forget wherever we were in Germany? He's like, for sure. So I just jailbroke, basically, like hired a private shuttle that came and picked me up, made it to his house, and then we just drove across the border because they didn't have any like COVID tests. I didn't need to like get a COVID test to fly or anything like that. So we just drove to Germany, and I was able to. I was negative when I got there, and it was all good and stuff like that. But that was the Slovakia story. So. A couple weeks in Slovakia doing magic with random food.
That's a wild story. Do you have these videos posted on like your Instagram that we could watch later?
Yes, actually. So I have what's called the quarantine diaries in my Instagram stories. And so I have every single video. I did vlogs every single day about updates of what was going on.
Yeah.
I would actually have to go back. It would probably be a better story to see. But I just filmed my entire time being there of what I was doing each day. Just like little 10-second clips here or there, or things that I was doing with the food and magic tricks and updates. So that's all on there. Also, I was doing, I had bands. So I was doing like Instagram lives of like band exercises, and that video has been shared like crazy now because I went through the routine of like, if you can't swim, these are my favorite exercises. It's a 20-minute band session, and during COVID, of course, everyone, like, pools were closed, so they're like, oh, this is great. And I still utilize that video to this day with like new athletes who are like, hey, like the pool's closed, or I can't get in a swim, or whatever. What is a good band workout? I'm like, boom, here's a link to this video I made in Slovakia. So I have a few of those things.
Yeah, that's sweet. We'll have to link them. Yeah, it's interesting how COVID or anything that creates, I guess, sort of a vacuum or an inability to do something really sparks creativity.
Yeah, for sure. You just have plenty of time to be able to think about things that you never would have been able to think about before.
Yeah, it's crazy. So going back to when you did the Olympic trials for the swimming, I assume that you didn't make it on the team. Is that kind of what happened? Okay.
Yeah, I ended up getting a sphenoid sinusitis. So basically a gnarly sinus infection. And the doctor said it was due to stress, just from like leading up to the Olympic Games. And I wasn't able to put my head underwater without like insane pain, like just knives going through my head. So I was having to train with this, and like every time I did a flip turn, it was like a nightmare. And so then I had to race with that, and so I didn't have the race that I was hoping to have, and didn't even make semifinals. So I went in ranked like second or third in the U.S. like time wise. And so I had a shot at making the Olympics, and then went to not even making semifinals at the trials. So that was unfortunate.
Yeah, was that like pretty crushing? Like you said, you went on to go kind of work and just go to skate park and stuff, but
honestly, no, it wasn't super crushing. But it did leave a chip on my shoulder for when I found out about triathlon and that it was in the Olympics. And that was like one of the sole reasons I decided to pursue the draft legal side of the sport rather than like non-drafting or even just anything in general. I was like, oh, here's another chance to like redeem myself at a sport.
Yeah, for sure. So how did you first hear about triathlon and then get involved into that vein?
Gas was really expensive in California at the time. And I was coaching swimming, working at Safeway at the grocery store. And I decided to buy a bike just so that I wouldn't have to pay for gas. The day that I bought a bike, I ran into one of my old junior lifeguard instructors who happened to be the race director of a local triathlon. And they were like, oh, hey, are you doing the race this weekend? I was like, what race? And they're like, oh, the triathlon. And I was like, what is a triathlon? And they're like, oh, you swim, bike, run. And like, it's this specific race, like, helps the college that I went to, like the sport department of it, and like high schools in the area, like all their sporting departments. It was like a fundraiser. So they're like, oh, it'd be really good to support, and like I'll give you a free entry if you just want to do it and like promote it, like tell your friends about it and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, okay. So they gave me a free entry, and so I just ended up doing this triathlon 1 week after never having owned a bike before. And I had skate shoes. I was just going to run in Vans the day before, but my mom was like, I need to buy you running shoes. So my mom bought me running shoes the day before the race. And so then I ended up doing that race first. I did that same race again. I got very competitive. So like the next year I was like, well, I'm going to do that race again, and I'm going to buy a nice bike. I'm actually going to like train for it, and I'm going to win it, and like all this stuff. And that was my only goal, was to win this race. And then I ended up running into the back of the lead van because a police officer stepped out in the middle of the road thinking the van was a car that wasn't supposed to be on the course. And I was on my time trial bike, just like head down, and I looked up and the van was coming to a screeching halt, and I just ran into the back of it.
Ouch.
And so I was in the newspaper for that reason. And then being in the newspaper, I got seen by a guy named Victor Plata, who went to the Olympics in 2004. He's from Santa Cruz as well. So he contacted me about coaching me and was like, hey, you're a swimmer. You have Olympic trial swim times. Like, I saw your talent with like run, swim, run races and junior lifeguards and stuff like that. I saw your talent naturally from the first race that you did in triathlon. Like, you need to do draft legal racing, which is in the Olympics. And so he had a meeting with me. And at that same time, two-time Olympic medalist, and he's in the Hall of Fame now, Bevan Docherty from New Zealand, moved to Santa Cruz at that exact same time and joined a master's group with one of my friends who I grew up with, who doesn't live in Santa Cruz anymore. He was just visiting his family and went to that one master's practice and told him to contact me and gave him my contact info.
Oh, wow.
And so Bevan contacted me, and I had just started the sport, and he was like, "Hey, I got your info from this other guy. Would you ever want to swim together?" So Bevan and I started swimming together, and now I had this 2-time Olympic medalist mentor that I just started this sport, and I got to grow up like doing the sport with like one of the best athletes at that time, like in the world.
Yeah.
And it was just like all these things. As I've said many times, everything just fell into place. It was right place, right time. My whole life, it's been like that.
Yeah.
And that was one of those things. Like, what are the chances of my buddy being at that one practice?
Yeah, for real.
Doesn't even live there anymore, and he's the only person at that whole practice that could have given Bevan my contact info. And if he hadn't been there, Bevan never would have contacted me. I never would have known that Bevan even lived there. Like all that stuff. It's crazy.
Yeah, that is crazy and a wild story. So how did your progression happen in the sport? Because obviously you're not racing professional anymore. Like how did that go and progress? Did you get where you wanted to go? And then you kind of transition into being the photographer at WTCS, and then like a talent scout, I think, for USAT and doing photography. So like, how did all that mix in over time?
Yeah. So, oh man, where to start with this?
Yeah. Sorry, it's a broad question. My bad.
So we'll do it real quick, but basically, I got my elite license at my third race ever. So my first draft legal race. Oh. Victor Plato is the name of my coach, the guy from Santa Cruz, the Olympian. And so he told me, "Oh, go to this race, get your elite license, and then we can race World Triathlon racing." So I did that. Got my elite license at my first race, and then Bevan was telling me, "You need to get to Europe and get on a French team." So he helped me get on a French Grand Prix team, and so I'd never traveled before ever, and I just moved to France and
Wow.
joined this French Grand Prix team, raced French Grand Prix. I would say that like my development was very unique, very different than anybody else in the sport, just because I had the mentorship of a very high level, international athlete. And like domestically in the US, people weren't going to Europe to race at that time. But it was like internationally, that's what a lot of the best guys were doing. And so like, never would have known about that. And like Victor would never have told me to do that unless Bevan had brought it up and Bevan had connected me with the right team and all that stuff. So he got me connected, started racing that. Results started to come, and then eventually I worked my way into getting into the higher level races.
Mm-hmm.
And then I kind of just like hovered around, I would say, average range, like let's say in the 20s. Just every single race I was like in the 20s, which made sense because like I was still building up my run. My aerobic capacity was much higher than like what my body could handle running, so I was getting injured all the time, and I ended up switching coaches. At the same time, I got the opportunity to be coached by Joel Filial, who now is one of the best coaches in the world. Like his resume speaks for itself, having so many Olympic medalists and world champions over the years.
Yeah.
But he was just starting his squad in 2012. 2013, but December of 2012, he came to me and was like, "Hey, I'm starting this squad and I want you to be a part of it because of your swim prowess. You would be a really good addition. And I think these other athletes that I'm going to be having come on board could help you with your run." And so then I went to the first camp, and then he supported me like crazy with like helping me out get to camps and just bringing me on board. And I've been part of Joel's squad now the longest out of anybody.
Wow.
I've outdone everyone except for Mario, who's technically still part of it. But I'm like 1 month before Mario, so still longer than him.
Yeah.
Racing wise, Mario has been racing much longer because I was with Joel until 2014 when I had a heat stroke and seizures at a race, and then was airlifted to a hospital.
Oh my goodness.
And then was in a coma for 19 hours, and they didn't think I was going to survive, and I ended up surviving. I lost my memory for a little over a week, but it eventually came back. And that was at the exact same time that I'd like just met Katie, and she was afraid that like I wasn't going to remember her and all this stuff. But anyhow, so from that point, I took a step back from like racing for myself, and I just started becoming Katie's training partner.
Yeah.
I would still race, but only when it worked out with my schedule. So like here or there, if I was going to be in this area and the race worked out, I would race. So I wouldn't like focus on things. My trying to qualify for the Olympics took a step. Like I didn't try anymore. I did get an opportunity though in 2015 at the test event for the Rio Olympic Games.
Mm-hmm.
I just went there to support Katie, and I'd just been training with her, but I put my name on the start list just in case like somebody got sick or like crashed or whatever. And that's what happened. I rolled onto the start list at the last moment.
Wow.
And had one of the best races of my life and almost qualified for the Olympic team,
Wow.
but ended up blowing up the last lap of the run and just overheated, and like everything from my heat stroke kind of like came back, so I wasn't able to like execute to the best of my ability, which was great. Like if I had made the Olympics, it probably wouldn't be good because Rio is super hot and humid and not a great place for me to race anyway. But it was just cool to like kind of go through that process of like, all right, I gave it a shot, did my best. But yeah, same thing. Like I still finished in the 20s. Like it was a very average result. So I never really made a name for myself. I did get one World Cup podium in Tongyang. I beat some really big name people actually. I was in a breakaway with Ben Canute and Henry Skuman, who Henry went on to win bronze in Rio. But yeah, that was probably the highlight of my career. That, and then I was third place at Aquathlon World Championships behind Alistair Brownlee and Richard Varga, who Richard Varga won like 7 different Aquathlon World Champs, and Alistair Brownlee is Alistair Brownlee. So having a picture on the podium with those guys, that was a highlight as well.
Yeah, I mean that's still a super impressive career, even though maybe not didn't pan out in terms of going to the Olympics and stuff. But it sounds like you've obviously been very well networked, and you got to figure out kind of your limits and things of that nature. So, but then how did you get to move into photography and then starting to work at these events as like a support on the content media side?
Yeah, so Katie and I did our photo walks, and then she bought me a camera, and I started taking pictures, and then I had my accident, and after my accident, she was like, can like you get a job or something so that I'm like not the sole person like making money. It's just like a lot of pressure on me. And so I started working for ROKA, who was one of our sponsors at the time. So when I started working for them, there was only 5 people at the company. And now it's like this huge company. They're doing all the sunglasses and eyeglasses, and like, they're big
massive
in all the different sports, not just triathlon. Anyway, so I started working for them because part of Joel's group, we had, I think, 6 of like 10 of the ROKA athletes. And so I was able to get content for them that we were utilizing for social media, for the website, for ads, for like everything. And I was just able to go to the World Triathlon races and get them content of like finish shots or like podium pictures and all that stuff. So ROKA was paying for me to go to races to provide them with content, and then I was being paid because I was working for them in general. And then by working for ROKA, of course, I had raced for World Triathlon like at the highest level, so I knew all the World Triathlon people, I knew all the athletes. That in turn gave me access that nobody else had. And the first time that I was, quote, noticed by World Triathlon was I asked permission. I'm like, hey, can I get in the swim familiarization with my GoPro and like take pictures of people?
Yeah.
And so they said, yeah, sure, if you don't mind like share. Actually, before that, they didn't even say that. They said, sure, because they knew who I was. And I was like, awesome. So I got in there, provided ROKA with the pictures, but then I provided all my other friends with pictures, and they all posted about the race. Like, here's the race in Abu Dhabi that's coming up this weekend. You can watch it on Triathlon Live. Like, World Triathlon is hosting this race. World Triathlon points, tagging World Triathlon, hashtag World Triathlon. So World Triathlon was like, whoa, look at all of these athletes promoting the race that never happened before. And so they're like, hey, can you do this again, like at a different thing? And so then they started flying me to races, and I started doing Facebook Live of the course familiarizations. So I would talk through the entire bike course of every single event on the circuit. So I was doing the pre-race swim galleries, the pre-race bike familiarization. I just started doing content for them. And then that proved to be very beneficial for their sponsors and their backers and like promoting everything. So then they went to the board and was like, look at the value of this. And then they hired me the next year. So the first year I just worked for free. They would pay for me to get to the races or like for my hotel, but I wasn't making money. But for me, it was great because I was getting paid to be with Katie and like watch her race. And like, I was able to utilize my content, not just for them, but for ROKA as well. So like, it was a benefit for everyone. But then, they offered me a contract the next year. And then that's when I started working for them contractually, like here, there. But then that blossomed into like a new media team came on board. The lady who originally like I was working with got a job working for the Olympic Committee. And so I ended up being the person who onboarded the new media team because I
Okay.
was the one who was working with them before. And so then I was like, oh, here's what we're doing now. And so then everything that I was doing for them content wise then became like the norm
Yeah.
for World Triathlon and like for other races with like all the pre-race build up and stuff. I never did video. Like I've only ever done still images. The video stuff, like I wasn't into, except for like the Facebook Live thing. I don't count
Sure.
that as video though, because that's not like editing together a specific thing. But yeah, the relationship that I had with the athletes, World Triathlon just took notice and was like, all right, we can utilize you in this way. And so then it worked out perfectly that I could train with Katie full time, work for ROKA, go to the races that she was racing at, and have my own hotel and flights paid for and get paid to be there. And yeah, it just couldn't have worked out any better.
Yeah, for sure. So that was that piece with World Triathlon. How did you get involved with USAT? I assume it was kind of all at the same time?
No, so USAT was very recent. That was a couple years ago. At this stage, ROKA had grown. So I started working for ROKA in 2014. And so fast forward to 2020. I've been working for them for 6 years. They've branched out from being triathlon specific, which I know about and I was involved with, and like everything that I was doing for them. I'm like, this is my whole life is triathlon.
Yeah.
But then they just were like, we have to go in on glasses. Glasses are universal. Triathlon's very niche. We have huge backers, but they want us to grow and develop our business as a whole. And the glasses just were taking off. So they're like, this is our opportunity to become a Nike or to become somebody that is universally recognized.
Yeah.
So I ended up having, because I worked for in the marketing department, and I'm like, I don't know how to market glasses. I don't know anything about glasses. I'm not passionate about this. So it just became a grind for the last like year basically. And I'm like, I didn't really notice until afterwards when I made a change what a grind the last year was.
Yeah.
But I just like wasn't happy. I wasn't enjoying. I wasn't coming up with like good stuff. I'd been doing the same thing for 6 years, you know. And I'm like, that it's hard to be creative and come up with new things. So at that same time, I didn't even know. It was just subconscious that I was kind of like, Summer Rappaport, she used to live here in Raleigh-Durham area, like Cary, where we live. So every once in a while, when she would be home and we would be home, we would get together with her and do a bike ride or do a swim or do a run. So she happened to be in the area for like one day. This comes back to my right place, right time.
Yeah.
We went on a run with her, and she just happened to mention like, oh, USAT is hiring like a new person for the CRP program. And I was like, what? Because I never was seeking out a new job. I wasn't looking at job listings. I wasn't like hoping something else would come up.
Yeah.
But when she said that, it just sparked something. And so we got back to the car, and immediately I just called my buddy. I was like, hey, I don't know what this job is from USAT, but I want it. And so he's like, oh, you would be the perfect person for the job. I was like, okay, what is it? And so then he basically explained what the job was after I had already wanted the job, regardless of what it was.
Yeah.
And so it turned out to be taking over the Talent ID program, which is the program that Gwen Jorgensen, Katie, my wife, came through, Summer Rappaport, Taylor Spivey, all the top, like Kirsten Casper, Morgan, Matt, were kind of part of that. But just that whole program, which has been the most successful USAT program that I'm very involved with because of being married to somebody who did the whole program.
For sure.
And I was like an athlete at the time that this was all growing. Now I was like, somebody needs to take over this program. Like, I know more than anybody about like the high performance side of things. I know more than anybody about what other athletes in other countries are doing. I know firsthand what Katie's experience was. I know all of these other athletes that I can like personally interview about how we can make things better. And so it just like was a perfect fit. So I kind of gave that speech in my interview and then ended up getting hired for that job in, I think it was 2021, November of 2021. And so we're coming up on 2 years. Actually, my 2-year anniversary might be like any day now. So yeah, it just worked out perfectly that we went on a run with Summer. She told me about it. I called and then was the right person for the job. And here we are 2 years later. I'm still in charge of that program and hoping to build it over the next like 5 or 6 years. Try to build it by like Olympic cycles. And I work very closely with the development side of sport and just the high performance side of things. So talent identification for the Olympic side. For college, for high school, and then also for para-triathlon. It's basically 3 jobs in one, and we're working on fixing that because it's too much. But that's kind of the role, if that explained everything.
No, that's pretty good. I'm curious, like on a day-to-day basis though, because like you're going to find these people. Are you going to races looking at numbers? Like what kind of like sets off a red flag where it's like, oh, Tommy, you need to go check out this person or talk to this person or reach out to that.
Yeah, so I work with our data analyst, and originally when we started, we didn't have this guy, and I was doing everything manually myself.
Yeah.
But now he scrubs the data of results from NC2A running. So, as an example, let's just do the Olympic side of things for collegiate,
Sure.
because that's the easiest way to explain. But basically, he scrubs all the results from the 800, 1500 mile, 3K steeple, 5K, 10K, like all of those events. He takes the top like 500 athletes and then runs their name through SwimCloud and USA Swimming and see if there's any matches. So
Okay.
every single match that he gets, he puts into an Excel spreadsheet. So as an example, there was 887 athletes that showed up that are on both running and swimming. So then I individually go through every single name and find out whether or not it's the correct person, like it's the same person who was running and swimming, by researching where they grew up and what they're doing and their bios and like emailing the school or whatever that is.
Yeah.
But the next thing is making sure that they hit standards. So the first thing I did when I got the job was I created a time standards guide that was all based off of what I know of training with the best athletes in the world and research from the last 10, 12 years of what the best athletes in the world are doing in these individual events. And so then I know when I cross-reference, all right, here's an athlete in college, this is what they ran in, let's say the 1500. I know if they would be competitive in the world of triathlon with those times. And so and it's a very general, it's not like a black and white line. Sure. Like it's a gray area. So I try to find people who are past it, but if they're not quite there, then I like judge this. So basically I'm looking for like Division I world-class runners and that have a swim background. But the swim background can't be any swim background. They need to send in a video of them doing a 200 time trial so I can see how they're swimming, and kind of assess that before they get an invite to a camp. So I go through the 887 names individually, find the athletes, color code them. The dark green athletes I contact first. And to get in contact with them, you have to email the school. So you email the school, send them a letter saying like, oh, you're one of very few Americans, which is true. Like the dark greens that I'm trying to find is maybe 4 or 5 athletes in the whole United States.
Wow.
So needles in haystacks. And so if you get a letter from a college about that, like you're a very special athlete. So I'll send the school this like very professional letter saying how unique this athlete is. They always pass it along to the athlete and the athlete gets in touch with me. So then I set up a Zoom call with them. I explain my program, I explain what triathlon is, and then ask them if they're interested in coming to a camp. If they are, I ask for the time trial filmed. They send it. If they're able to hit a certain number of time or a certain time, then they get invited to the camp, and that's when they get further assessed by coaches. We see what their natural talent is, their natural ability, their coachability, their mentality, their commitment to the sport, how quickly they pick up bike skills, how they approach like time trials, how they approach bike power tests, if they're different in training as opposed to a race scenario, all of these things. And they're further assessed and vetted. And then they kind of fall into a different tiered system. And then I work with them individually to set up the best path for them. And the athletes who are the best of the best performers get accepted into the program. And then we have a funding model that I set up that I don't really need to get into, but sure. We help nurture that, set them up with coaches, training environments, and then give them the resources that they need to succeed. So all the equipment, the race planning, mentorship, guidance, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And that's like the breakdown of the CRP program. We also I do the same thing for high school. Okay. It's slightly different what that path is, but the scrubbing of data is exactly the same, and setting up Zoom calls is exactly the same. On the paratriathlon side, it is very complicated and very challenging, but same thing. Yeah. Try to find athletes. I created time standards guide for every single classification. If I find an athlete who can hit these, then they get invited to a camp and then we work with them. But there's no database of para athletes like there is NC2A programs. You just need to find these athletes, and where do you find them? Like, so you need to be in contact with organizations, and like you need to run campaigns, and it's a whole job by itself. And so to do these 3 different jobs is impossible. So I was like just scrounging by, and unfortunately this year the para side kind of like fell to the wayside because of the things that were happening on the Olympic side of things. Sure. I'm currently working with some other people from USAT, and we're trying to get somebody fully hired for the para triathlon side of things.
Yeah.
So I'll still work with like the highest performance athletes,
Sure.
but the vetting process of going through to find those athletes is what is very taxing, because there's a difference between participation and performance, and my role is solely on performance, but you can't find performance without participation.
Yeah.
So we just need somebody to like lay the groundwork, get people involved with the participation, and then I can like pluck them based on the time standards guide of what we see and what we're expecting.
Yeah.
So hopefully that broke down a little bit.
No, yeah, it's really interesting because it gives a little bit more of an in-depth understanding of what's going on behind the scenes. Because we did an episode with Tim Yount a number of weeks ago, and he explained from a very high level the different high schools and the programs that are going on with that and colleges and how you're trying to like funnel everything eventually, I guess, toward the Olympics for USAT. But yeah.
And so it works in two parts because as I said with the Excel spreadsheet, let's say it has 887. Not all of those people are high performing athletes. Only 4 or 5 are dark green in my color coding, which is the best. And so all the others I still have in a spreadsheet. And so then I pass them along to coaches or to Tim Yount, who can get in touch with them and say, hey, triathlon's a sport. You could do it in college. You could do it as a club athlete. Like, so for high school athletes, like you could start a club. Here are some junior coaches you could get connected with.
Mm-hmm.
So they're working on the participation side and just growing the sport with the athletes who may be good, may not, but most likely they don't hit the standards. And so then I just take the highest performing athletes and work with them. And then everybody else still gets notified or like involved with the sport. It's not like they just fall off the edge of the earth. But I feel like we're working pretty well, USAT as a whole, in trying to find a place for everyone in every aspect.
Yeah. How often do you have to do these like data scrubs? Do you do it every quarter, once a year?
So they have indoor track season, outdoor track season, and cross country season. So I just had a call right before this podcast with our data crunch guy because all the regional championships just happened in NC2A cross country. So right now we'll scrub data from every single regional cross-country championship that happened instead of just nationals, because there are some athletes, let's say only top 5 go to nationals from a high-power school. Maybe 6th place was the same as 5th, just like slightly off. Maybe they have a really deep school, so they're not in nationals. And so if we just scrub the nationals data, that one athlete would not be on any lists. Yeah. And so, going through all the regionals, every single athlete, every single name, I'll go through every single one of them to make sure I don't miss anything. Cross-reference them and then get in touch with them and that way. So anyway, to answer your original question, no, I don't fly out anywhere. I don't go to any races. It's all done online and then like Zoom calls. But then, I do follow their results. And if there's a race like the Raleigh Relays, I'll go to the Raleigh Relays and like watch how the athletes actually race. Or I'll just follow up with them. I'll individually ask them for a race recap. How did it play out? Where were you at the beginning of the race, to get an idea of how they raced it? Because the perfect example of this is I had 2 athletes that raced in Raleigh Relays 10K. One athlete, they just went to the front and were just driving it for the front and like just went all out trying to hold on and then ended up fading and then finished, 10th place or whatever. The other guy started at the very back and paced it perfectly and just picked off one guy at a time and then finished like 3rd. So it's like knowing the difference between race styles or how things played out, or like who was making kind of a sacrifice of like, maybe I can hold on, maybe I won't. Like, you just get to know an athlete better. It's like, okay, this person was being very conservative. Is that smart, or were they being safe? Was this person being stupid, or were they being like trying to figure out what their body can do? So there's just more information than if I just looked on paper and seen their 10K times and saw a 3rd place guy was like 15 seconds faster than the other guy, but didn't know how the race played out, how the other guy was ahead for 9K and then got past, the last 400 meters. It's important to know that stuff. So, the first stage is just making sure that they have the times and then being in touch with them and then following up consistently. So it's a full-time thing. I'm just thankful that it can be remote and that we have technology now that allows this to happen.
Yeah, for sure. I'm curious, and it may be a stupid question, but you said you scrub like the swimming and the running data. Is there cycling data that could be scrubbed as well?
Yes and no. It doesn't need to be scrubbed because, unfortunately, cycling in the U.S. is pretty barren lands. I went through road cycling nationals results. the level that you need to be in triathlon as a cyclist is extremely high. So all the best cyclists are going to be pro cyclists, and all the pro cyclists are usually not very good at the other two sports. And so even if they were like a really fast runner and a strong cyclist, as an example, I found this one guy, Seth Hirsch is his name. He did an insane power test, like power numbers you've never seen before, like world tour. This guy is going to be an incredible cyclist, but he came from a running background and he has world leading triathlon run times. Like he would be one of the fastest runners that we would have in the sport right now in the US. So he has two of these things going for him. And so I asked him, I was like, oh, could you send me a 200 free time trial? He couldn't finish 100 free. Like he could not finish the actual 200. And like his swim was so bad that there was no way that he would make it in the sport. So it was like, oh, so frustrating.
Yeah.
But he's so rare that like I have not found another cyclist who is solid in the other two. So yes, the answer is we do scrub cycling stuff, but it has not proven any results. Also in World Triathlon racing, what's more important are the swim and the run. The cycling can be learned, and if you have the aerobic capacity that you're talented in both the swim and the run, you're gonna have talent in the bike, most likely. So that's kind of where we're keeping our focus.
Yeah, super fascinating. Well, I just have a couple more questions because I know you got to run here in just a few minutes. I guess the first question before the last: what has you most excited right now?
Everything that I'm doing with USA Triathlon.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like.
Yeah, watching everything fall into place. It's really hard in this position because it's so long term that as people in general, we like seeing results right away, or like you like doing something and then it's done and you can show something for it. So if you do a race and you win, you get the medal or whatever. Like if you mow the lawn, you can see it looks beautiful. Like, but for this, it's like, all right, you need to break things down. You need to have an idea. You need to brainstorm how to do it. You need to refine it. You need to change it. You need to do it. So as an example, I have, let's say, 29 athletes right now that are insanely high tier potentials, but they don't graduate until 2026 or 2028 or whatever. And then when you're looking at the timeline of athletes, let's just say you're following all the protocols that we're hoping you do. That's a 2-year process to go from zero to the national team, or from zero to getting starts at the World Triathlon Championship Series. 2 years is when the Olympic qualification points start. So, 2 years out from Olympics is when Olympic points start. So basically, you need to be at the top level 2 years before an Olympic Games, which means that 4 years before an Olympics, we need to find this athlete and get them set up, and they need to start the sport. So that by 2 years, they've made it to the top level, and that's when Olympic points qualification starts, and then they can qualify for the Olympics. So one athlete is a 4-year process, and that is extremely fast. So right now, you're not going to see any results of these athletes that I'm finding until after LA 2028, probably. Hopefully LA 2028, you'll see some fruit of my labor. But Brisbane 2032 is probably the next time. Like, obviously, the Olympics isn't the end-all, be-all. Like, I could still find world champions and national team members throughout the years. But if we are talking about Olympic medals, like, we're not going to find out till 2032 if any of these athletes that I found work, and so that to me is like, it's a little bit frustrating, but I'm excited for the amount of time that I have to be able to set all this stuff up. And all the things that I have, like the dominoes, I'm like just getting ready to, flick it and watch them all like fall into place. I'm excited about that. And also I'm just excited about my position with World Triathlon, like how everything's going on that front, how things are working with like Katie and my relationship and having our son and like getting involved with that rhythm of things. Just life in general is like, it's good.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, it sounds amazing. I'm really excited to see how everything turns out, especially with the Olympics coming back here to the U.S. in 2028. It'll be really interesting to hopefully reach out to you and say, hey, which ones of these were the ones you were watching 4, 7, 6 years ago?
Yep, pressure's on.
Pressure's on for sure. All right, so last question, a stupid question. So Crocs and McDonald's are releasing a limited edition shoe collaboration for when you want to show your devotion to, I guess, the grimace beyond braving the shake. So what do you think about this partnership?
I have zero thoughts. I hate that stuff. Yeah.
Have you ever owned a pair of Crocs?
No, and Katie is sponsored by UFOs, and
Okay,
so
they're like,
UFOs
yeah.
sent me an entire box that matched her box. So I'm all kitted out with like more UFOs than I can even imagine. Also, fun fact, Katie and I are the exact same size for bike and for shoes, for helmets,
Oh,
for
that's
everything.
awesome.
So when we travel, like she can always use any of my stuff.
That's nice.
And
Redundancy.
I don't use her stuff, but
Yeah.
if she were to go to a race and like needed a bike or a helmet or shoes, she can use it. So we also, when she has a shoe sponsor, we can wear the same shoes, like running shoes wise.
Oh, that's sick.
And so for UFOs, I was like, oh, cool. I'll like be able to wear some of Katie's shoes. But UFOs just sent me an entire box, like, $800 worth of UFOs probably. And so, yeah, I'm hardcore UFOs.
Nice. That's awesome. Good deal, man.
So if UFOs has a collaboration with not a fast food restaurant,
Yeah.
but somewhere that is
Maybe a nutrition
let's say a
company.
niche burger place, that
Yeah.
would be nice.
Yeah, for sure.
A Thai food restaurant.
Oh, Thai food. Gotta love Thai food. Yeah, for sure, man. Well, thank you so much, Tommy, for coming on and just talking a little bit about your history. Let me pry a little bit and, yeah, just hear what's going on. It's been really fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for all the questions and the smooth flow of life events.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks again so much to Tommy for coming on and sharing a little bit about his story of where he's been, where he's at, and where he's going. It was especially neat to hear about the work that he's doing with USA Triathlon to do the talent scouting using all the data analytics. That's such a neat thing. If you made it to this point in the podcast, just want to say thank you so much. If you wouldn't mind, if you are listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please give us a review. It really helps us to grow. If you want to ask any specific questions, you can actually do that through the Spotify app, and you can scroll down there at the bottom and ask us specific questions. So that would be cool. You could do that. If you would like to follow us more in depth, you can do that on the website at stupidquestions.show. You can sign up for the newsletter, and we do exclusive giveaways and other stuff planned for the future. If you want to sign up for that, you can do that there. And finally, if you're on YouTube watching this video, please give us a like and subscribe. Leave a comment below, as it really helps to grow the channel as well. All right, I think that's it for this one. Thanks again to Tommy. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next one. Thank you so much to Precision Fuel and Hydration for sponsoring today's episode. Amazing company that makes amazing products. I have been testing out anything from their chews, which are my favorite, or their carb-only mix, or different kinds of carb mixes that include the different levels of sodium that you may need to keep your electrolytes in balance. Check them out. You can go to pfandh.com/stupid questions, and you can get 15% off any of their stuff there. They also have an amazing tool that gives athletes a personalized plan for their next race, which provides a lot of great basis for you to iterate and refine your strategy come race day. You can make yours at precisionhydration.com/planner. That's /planner. And yeah, so if you want to get an awesome discount with some awesome products, make sure to check it out. That's at pfandh.com/stupid questions. You can also find the stuff in the show notes.